So Iron Lung is the directorial debut of Markiplier, based on a video game about a man trapped in a submarine in an ocean of blood, and he encounters monsters and madness. This film, for being the directorial debut for Markiplier, I think it's a very strong first effort, because there are. I will say this: the things I like about this film right off the bat is the atmosphere and the production design. I feel like Markiplier really put a lot of effort into making like this very like claustrophobic environment feel like it was very very grimy, very decayed. Really stressed the darkness and the empty nature of this mission. And I think that really works for this type of setting. I think that the problem is just that he sets up all this like great stuff, and then it doesn't really progress anywhere all that intriguing as it goes along. It just kind of feels like it's spinning its wheels, for lack of a better term, because I like the way that the film starts off. I like the whole premise that he goes with right from the get-go. I mean, you have Markiplier in the film playing this convict called Simon, who's been assigned duties to pilot this experimental craft into this big ocean of blood and trying to like find any evidence of resources that could help out humanity, because there's this whole big deal how like the stars are going out and the trees are all gone, and it's the end times, and humanity's just got to find some way to push through and try to find some key to their survival. And it all seems grim and dark and pointless, and he questions, what is the point of risking his life just for trying to progress humanity a little bit longer. So I like how it starts on that angle. But as the film goes along, I almost kind of feel like once Markiplier like got the whole setting right, because I have not played the video game, in case you're wondering. I get the feeling that once he got the setting right of maintaining that atmosphere, and once he got like a pretty good soundtrack, a very brooding soundtrack, once you got all those material elements going, that the rest of the film would just kind of like unfold from there, and it kind of does. But the problem is, it paced at 2 hours and 7 minutes. It really kind of slogs for how slow it progresses and how it tries to like keep everything a little bit too vague, but almost for like the sake of making it more compelling. Because honestly, once you start piecing together, the Simon's backstory and what the deal is with the organization trying to track down this monster, and all like the technicalities of how like the sub works with like its X-rays that have to like shoot directly through like the blood just to like see anything. I think it's all very clever, but once you get used to it, much like Simon does, it just becomes a bit of a grueling experience, and it never felt like there was momentum. Like it never felt like I was learning enough about the character where I was intrigued to see where Simon went. Like, don't get me wrong, he's an interesting character. Like you learn about his regrets and how he feels about the world, and the stuff that drives him mad, and his desire to see if like there's anything worth living for. I think he's an interesting character. I think the problem is that there's never enough time to like explore something more. It always feels like he's like dead focused on the mission, and anytime there's got to be something more surreal and scary, it just kind of feels like it felt like a haunted house at times. It's just like, okay, here's spooky stuff, like here's blood dripping from the ceiling, and here's like a phantom in the distance, and here's like a monster just outside the craft, and it's like, okay, this is all kind of spooky stuff, and I do admire the details that went into assembling it all, but it never quite felt like everything was connecting here. It always just felt like a series of spooky things that could happen in this very contained vessel. And to the credit of Markiplier, the way that he actually shoots this contained environment is pretty well done. It's a very cramped space, but he has a great variety of shots. Like there's close-ups of the blood dripping from like the pipes, and the close-ups of Simon's face where you kind of see like the anxiety bleed from him. There's even some extreme close-ups of like the consoles where he's making like daring choices of like where to steer the craft and trying to track his trajectory. But there's also a lot of scenes where you get too used to it. Like there's an entire sequence where he's pretty much flying blind, and he has to like track his coordinates on a map, and it's just dull. I mean, I'm sure that he shot it in a way where he's hoping that, you know, watching this character like slowly learn where he is without like, you know, a lot of visibility, and trying to use the limited light sources that he has. I think he thought that would be kind of clever, but it just goes on and on and on. We're just like, okay, can something more substantial or scary happen? It really did feel like it was trying to replicate that essence of like where you're stuck in a video game and you just keep, you know, forcing yourself through trial and error, which, you know, when you're playing a video game, that's pretty fun. But when you're watching somebody do it in a movie, it's kind of a little bit too grueling. You're kind of like, okay, I get it. Can we go forward? Can we skip ahead here to like where, you know, there's actually some more development with this character? Another problem with the script is that the dialogue, like I've never played the video game, but listening to the dialogue, it really did feel like it was ripped from the video game. There's a line where Simon says, "This is not an expedition, it's an execution." It feels like something that would be placed in a video game. It's a cheesy line, but I've got to give credit to Markiplier for his delivery, because I'm sure a big question on everybody's mind is, can Markiplier act? And the answer is kinda. And I say that because like my one fear was that it was going to be a laughable performance. Like he was going to try to be serious, and because Markiplier has built himself up as he's this very, you know, very loud, very verbose type of character when he's streaming video games, that it was going to falter, and that was all you're going to see. Like you're not actually watching an actor perfectly portraying a prisoner. You're watching a streamer trying to masquerade, you know, as this prisoner trapped in a submarine. And thankfully, it wasn't on that level. I think Markiplier is restrained enough to take this role seriously. The problem is he doesn't really have much, like, when he has to like be more angry and furious and have like that hope drained from his eyes, it never quite felt there. It always felt like, you know, he's definitely trying, but I didn't feel like the same emotional edge when you compare it to like the other characters in this film who are almost entirely off screen. Like you have the woman who plays his commander, played by Carolyn Rose Kaplan. She actually delivers a pretty damn good performance. Like you see a little bit of her, but for the most of the film, you just hear her through the speakers, and you can sense like a lot more determination and anger and just like stakes that are on the line within her voice, that I really loved hearing her. And especially, I don't think it really bodes well for the film when you also saddle Markiplier next to veteran voice actor Troy Baker, who for the few times that he's in the film as a voice, he's really good. And then you see like you can see like the difference between like, you know, these actors who are mostly just voice only, who give like pretty good performances, next to Markiplier, who's doing okay, but you know, when it comes to being more emotional, I think there's a big problem with that, especially by the time it gets to the third act, where it's mostly just him getting frustrated and angry and just like screaming, you know, like, what the fuck is going on here? I kind of just like sat back at that point by the third act and just realized like, yeah, I see where the story is going. I don't really think all the pieces are connecting here, but you know what? There is a lot of effort put into the production design, so I guess I could just, you know, appreciate the special effects and, you know, all the effort that went into the grand finale, where the entire submarine starts like filling up with gallons and gallons of blood, which it looks really good. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really like the effects here, but they also kind of they linger a little bit too long, and the film becomes very reliant on it at times. Like at one point, there's a scene where something very horrible happens to Simon, and a body part comes off of him, and it's meant to be like shocking, but there's a lot of time spent, you know, showing how the limb comes off, you know, looking at where the limb used to be, looking at where the limb is now, looking back at the limb, looking at all like the blood and everything. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's a good effect, but we're lingering way too long on this, and I get the feeling that's the majority of this film, is that there was a lot of effort put into the design and how the film was shot and trying to make it look good, and it does look good. But then it just kind of like spins its wheels, trying to like find stuff to do. Like oh, like what if he imagines like a voice, or what if he starts seeing a weird light, and what if he hallucinates being in a pool of blood and sees this monster? And it's like, oh yeah, okay, all these kind of very scary and spooky things, but they never really connect with anything. It just felt like a series of scary things that could go on in a submarine. A big problem with this film is that I didn't really care for Simon as much. And I think that's mostly because Simon feels more like a passenger on this vessel. It always felt like Simon just, he has to like just go through the motions. Like he has to uncover this material. He has to hear these weird voices. He has to feel like he's not being let in on the mystery, and that he's got to like put all the pieces together and try to find a way to survive all of this. And it's like, okay, that's pretty good, but it's like I don't really care for him much beyond that. And it feels like there's a bigger story here, especially like with this backstory of being betrayed and his doubts about if humanity should keep on living. I think there's a lot to explore there, and it never quite feels like the film goes the extra mile. It always kind of feels like it's trapped within its setting. And I don't mean that literally. I mean like it's trapped within its central setting of trying to like navigate the ocean of blood and just all the other elements of this apocalyptic future is more just like bland peppering on the outside. Like they talk about how the stars are going out with the quiet rapture, and there's the last tree, and it's just like, okay, these are all like familiar cliches of, you know, the apocalyptic environment, which I don't think are that interesting, which I kind of go back and forth on, you know, appreciating Markiplier for not focusing on them too much. Because I get the feeling if they spent a lot of time just talking about the world, it would not be that interesting. It would be even more boring than the film already is in its second act. But at the same time, it's like, well, if that stuff is boring, well, how can you make it more interesting? What's a more fascinating angle to take with that? And I feel like it just kind of it's pulling back too much. Like it's trying to restrain itself. It sounds weird to say this, but I think that's the most frustrating thing, is that I think Markiplier kind of limits himself in this film. I think he tries to keep it too small by focusing on just like a few key things here, while still making the film well over 2 hours. I think if this film were like a much tighter 90 minutes and just like a series of like, you know, well executed spooky things that happen in a submarine, I think it would actually be a pretty damn good film. And I say that mostly because I appreciated the production design and its cinematography, but we spend way too much time that it just becomes like a slog, and a lot of the themes just get more and more watered down as the special effects and the scary elements take over a little too much. And I wish I could like the film a little bit more, but it's just like it like I said, it has pacing problems. I never really cared about Simon. I felt like Markiplier's acting was good for the type of character he was playing, but when you compare it to who he's playing off of, it's a little, it needs some work. It feels as rusty as the submarine that he's within. So Iron Lung, it's a valiant effort. I think it's a pretty strong directorial debut for Markiplier. But I think he kind of like stretches himself too thin with this material. I think, you know, for pulling triple duty as like director and screenwriter and actor, I think the one element where he does the best is director. And it makes me very hopeful to see what he would do next. Like if he had like a screenwriter writing much better dialogue, or a host of actors, to see how he would direct them as well. Because I really did like the direction of the commander character, or the speaker. I thought she gave a fantastic performance, which makes me wonder what if Markiplier was right behind the camera the whole time as director and had that complete control. So you know, for a lot of directors, they are a little bit rusty on their debut, and you know, Markiplier is no exception here. But for being a first film, especially a very small budget film based on a video game, I think it does pretty well with the material. I think it needs just a little bit more fine tuning, and it does make me hopeful to see what Markiplier does next. But Iron Lung, it still kind of feels like it's a little bit too long. It's got a few too many cliches, and Markiplier's acting didn't grip me as much as I'd like to for a film that wants you to spend the entire 2 hours with them. So yeah, Iron Lung, it's a pretty good directorial debut. It's just Not as great as I'd like it. As a video game film, it's way up there. Like I mean, that's an easy bar to cross, but yeah, it's an okay film. It needs a few tweaks. It needs a little bit more than like the duct tape that Markiplier keeps putting on this film, trying to keep it all held together. I think there's a lot more that he can do as a director, and I feel he kind of stretched himself a little bit too thin with Iron Lung.